Hi, it's Cathy Cress, and I am doing a new webinar on essentially what is called death and dying. And the name of the webinar, and thank you so much for joining, is Deliver a Good Life to the Very End, Death and Dying to Your Care Management Agency. And above it you will see the insight that I want you to have while listening to this. And this is Atl Gawande, who wrote Being Mortal, a wonderful book, wonderful doctor who is also a great writer. Our ultimate goal, after all, is not a good death, but a good life to the very end. And in showing you how to add a geriatric care management death and dying service, we are going to show you how to have that good life to the very end. Now, building your business, any kind of business, is like building a house. You want to frame it, and you can see the framing there and the studs. And the frame are really your care management skills. And that's your education, your undergraduate degree, your graduate degree, hopefully in geriatric care management or one of the health professions, social work, nursing, physical therapy, any of those skills, but you have a background in health. And you can get a master's degree in geriatric care management at the University of Florida. Then you chose to go into geriatric care management and you had practice. You've practiced in the field, hopefully for a number of years. That's your frame. You have to know how to do this, just like a plumber needs to study plumbing. And I'm only making that comparison because it applies to any business. So then you want to put walls into these buildings that you have. And your walls are your business plan, and that's from soup to nuts, how you're going to run this business. What are the products? How much do they cost? How will you sell them? What are the exact steps that you're going to take to sell those products? And that, in essence, is your operations manual, because you have defined products, and one of the products we're going to add is death and dying, end of life, and then you're going to define all the steps that you go through, and that's called an operations manual for all of your services. Then you want to wire that house, because it now has walls with technology. Through this webinar, I'm going to show you how to add a new wall, which is end-of-life care management. What is your role as a care manager in a death and dying service? Well, you're the navigator. You are the moving gear that moves the family and the patient through the death and dying process. And you move the family through the continuum of care, just like you do with any geriatric care management service. But in this case, it's a death and dying process. So you get services, and that's the G. And the services that you are going to get to serve the client are not right away, palliative care and hospice, but you're going to get things like medical equipment, you're going to arrange driving to doctor's appointments, which hopefully will be you. You are going to bring in support groups, you are going to bring in grief groups, you are going to bring in whatever it takes to help this person, the support services they need to get through death and dying. You're also going to educate them about the disease, because most people come into this diagnosis shocked. They have Parkinson's, they have cancer, a specific type of cancer. And so you're going to bring all the information possible to help educate them so they can ask intelligent questions and really use that information to make intelligent choices along the way of all the medical people they're going to run into, and certainly to help the older person, and the older person who is dying to help themselves, and it takes education. And then you're going to assess for a number of things, and that includes cultural diversity. You assess psychosocially, you assess functionally, you assess whether level of care, whether it's appropriate for them to be home, or if they should move to a higher level with a hospice, or perhaps use hospice at home. But you're going to assess. And cultural diversity is really important. We're going to talk about this because the American way of death is not the only way. Every culture has a different way. And then you're going to advocate for person-centered care and family-centered care, so that the care that the dying person gets they get to make the choices, and they get to make educated choices and the choices they want, and family-centered care that the family is completely involved. And after that, you just do the routine, not just, steps in geriatric care management: assessment, create a care plan, monitor, relieve caregiver burden, anticipatory grief, we're going to talk about that, and suicidal thoughts, and many, many other things. So we're going to use an example here of a care manager I worked with, and we'll call her Nellie Caremuch. And she's a composite, and she came to me, she had started her care management business just with assessment and care planning on her web page. You know, the routine things that many, many care managers put on web page. They say that's what they're going to do. However, clients who come to your web page, they don't understand that. They really want a product because they have a problem and they want that product to solve it. So moving, you know, from one area to another is a product. They need 24-hour care and not monitoring of that because they're long distance. All of these are products that you offer on your website, and death and dying is one of them. So she was noticing she wasn't making very much money because she had this limited offering, and yet people were calling her and they wanted they wanted someone to help their mother move and decide to move. They wanted a caregiver assessment because they were burnt out, or they said they were burnt out, and she could offer caregiver assessment. Discharge from the hospital, you know, that's a great product for geriatric care managers because Medicare is now fining hospitals if discharge happens and readmit happens in 90 days. And so death and dying was another product, but she was really afraid to do that because she thought, well, hospice and palliative care took care of that. And I worked with her. I added services, multiple products to her service, and I added death and dying. And I gave her the steps to serve the death and dying client, intake through the 5 stages of achieving that good death, showed her how she was key to introducing palliative care and hospice because most clients only choose it in the last month because they hold out for a cure. And care manager is key to doing that. And she was welcome. The hospice team was very happy to have a geriatric care manager involved because they could be, and palliative care, be involved at an earlier point if it was appropriate for the client, and that the care manager could work right along with that because they can assess, they can advocate, they can educate, they can solve the problems in all the stages of death. And so she started doing that after I added it. She had 100 inquiries over 3 months and had 10 new clients and grew from there, and she made a profit the following year. Why can I teach you this? I wrote a book called Care Managers Working with the Aging Family that has a wonderful chapter in it about death and dying by Gwen, who is a panelist here, and she will be talking. And I've been teaching death and dying for 15 years through Berkeley, San Francisco State, the University of Florida, and lecturing at many colleges. And I wrote the only manual in the field, my Geriatric Care Management Agency Operations Manual, where I just added death and dying as a service. And I also wrote the Handbook of Geriatric Care Management, which is out in its 4th edition as of October. So, what we're going to cover today: how you can transition the family through the 5 stages of death, how you can help the client be an active participant in their care. Atl Gawande tells us this. Give the family caregiver tools to manage that care, and then provide a family-centered care to the caregiver, which is so important because caregivers, as you well know out there, they end up going to the hospital but faster than the people that. And then you can choose the right support services at the right stage of death or death of dying, like the 3 bears. I always love, you know, Goldilocks. So that, you know, if they can sit in the right chair, and then you can introduce hospice and palliative care, and then work with them as a team member. So what are you? You're a navigator, and you transition the patient and the family through the 5 stages of death, and you help the family navigate through this very tumultuous ocean. You're the boat, and you help them with their reactions to terminal illness. So you help them through the wake of the 5 phases of terminal illness. You help them through the rough seas of the diagnosis and the symptoms and to recognize the illness. You help them through the killer waves of the acute phase where they're getting chemo, treatment. You help them through the chronic phase, which, goes on through the diagnosis and then the results of treatment, whether, this has been cured. You help them through the acceptance phase where they haven't been cured and death is going to come. You help them through the terminal phase between diagnosis and final decline so that they've had this good death. And your job before the diagnosis, we're going to go through the 5 stages. This is when people start to notice symptoms, they recognize the illness, they schedule appointments. And what you're going to do is you're going to help the family ask questions. And this is so important because death is so medicalized. Hospitals are so medicalized. So you're going to educate them and really help them to have, the know-it-all that they can ask those doctors questions intelligently and get the answers. You can help them maintain an up-to-date care plan med list because they're usually so overwhelmed they don't do that. You can organize documents, which are so important with advanced directives. You start then. You can go to the medical appointments with the client or train family members to go and ask those questions intelligently, get the good answers, get the answers they need, and set up a personal health record. Your job at the acute phase, which is the time before diagnosis and the results of treatment, where the patient is shocked and they might completely shut down. The patient and the family need time to digest. They struggle with side effects because chemo, radiation, etc., and they confront, I remember my mother having lung cancer and she said, "My hair, Cathy, my hair is gone." This is a horrible thing for people. Their appetite, their ADLs. So they shift from coping and hope into coping with the illness. And what can you do? You can help them through all of that. And then the chronic phase, this is the period between the diagnosis and the results of the treatment, whether it's going to work. And you coordinate the continuum of care again, and that means you bring in things like support groups for the caregivers, support groups for the family. You bring in, anything that you can in your vast knowledge, and you will have a vast knowledge out there, that can support this family and this caregiver. You can educate the healthcare staff and which becomes the family at that point, about disease management. And you can bring in videos, hard copy, the cancers, all the associations that are out there that can support you, that you can support them so that they have a team. And then you can monitor anticipatory grief, because even though the person hasn't died, everyone is starting to grieve about that death that hasn't even occurred, and you need to help them with that. Monitor caregiver burden, because caregivers, as I said, they go in the hospital earlier than the clients, and get tools for relief for caregiver burden. You can arrange in-home support, because nobody else does that. Hospice palliative care doesn't do that, so you're going to arrange in-home support, paid, or organize the family to do that, and then set up family meetings, because all these things haven't been resolved in families usually. So get them to work as a team so that they can voice their fears, their anger, whatever it is, to get over it in a good way and help the client get the death they need. And then check those docs again, because advanced care planning is everything. So the acceptance phase, this is the period of time after all the chemo, the radiation, when it hasn't worked, and the family and the client need to accept that death is going to happen. And your tasks then are, monitor this response to the treatment that they've already had. What are the residuals? Monitor the family's ability to accept and deal with this finality, this diagnosis. Especially monitor comfort and pain, because you can bring palliative care in then. You can bring it in at any stage where you think it's appropriate and the client agrees. it gets not brought in at the right stage usually, and explain palliative care. And so the terminal phase, that's any time between the diagnosis and the final decline. There's no cure. Death is intimate, and the family and the patient have to face death. They have to face how to comfort themselves, how to control the pain, and then religious concerns come up, and they come up all along the way. But, you know, death brings us very close to a faith or a spiritual belief we maybe didn't have before. And so your job is to monitor that anticipatory grief and its needs and be able to respond to it with the family, extended family, and especially the patient. Communicate that this is the end. It's time to say goodbye. Assess what the spiritual needs are and bring them in. Bring in the religious and the spiritual counselors. Bring in prayer. Bring in singing. Bring in choir. Bring in whatever it takes to help this person pray together, whatever it is, to make them feel better and spiritually connect. And then encourage, or not, you maybe be very respectful that they don't want any of that. And then encourage family members to say those 4 things that matter at the end. Please forgive me. I forgive you. Thank you. And I love you. And your job again, you know, DPA Finances becomes really important at this point, because if you don't take care of it, it's going to be a mess at the end. Make sure that there is somebody that's managing all of this, and it's the person chosen by the person who's dying. Personal and financial records, you can re-inventory again. Docs, does everybody have them, and does the person who needs to have them, are they all arranged? Bank accounts, does everybody know where all the bank accounts are, and are they secure? Social Security and Medicare, and I would also add the VA. The VA comes in at every juncture here if it's a VA person, but the VA benefits can go on to the surviving spouse, so you've got to be able to manage that. And then advanced care planning, again, should have been done in the first stage, but wrap it up. Now, Michelle, my trusty, unbelievably important person who handles the back end, is going to run a little poll here.
Oh, great, Cathy. You know what? I did not even know that we had a poll for today. And
well, happy poll.
Okay, all right. Well, great. Well, what's the best way to reach you about webinars? So since there's no actual poll to send out, you guys are going to just type in your answers into the question panel. What's the best way to reach you about webinars? And we'll see what we've got here.
And you can add other things. The GCM listserv, I can't really put that on the listserv, but, you know, ways that if I do another webinar, you might attend.
Right. So let's see. Let's see if I can find my question panel, and there it is, and we'll see what we've got. Most of the people are saying email, and a few people have said Facebook, but it seems to be that email is winning out.
Okay.
All right.
Okay. All right. Thank you very much for doing that, both Michelle and everybody that answered. Okay, so we're going to get into the client and the family now. How can you as a care manager, in adding this service to your business, help the client be an active participant? Because that's why I used Atl Gawande. You want to make them the center of care and the center of choice. Active participants in their own care. The services they receive should be centered on their needs and their preferences, not the family's, not the medical way of death, even though those forces are important and they can be integrated. So the patient-centered care needs to contrast with disease-centered care, Gawande tells us this. And that's where physicians have all the control and they make all the treatment decisions, and they're based largely on clinical experience and tests and data. So you want to, that is your job, to help the client be educated and be able to, you know, make their choice. And you can do a quality of life assessment in the very beginning. I'm building that in to the service, and especially Anya can help you because she is a music therapist with hospice. And you know, there's lots of ways that you can bring quality of life and a good death if all of this can be turned away from a medical treatment version. And your tasks are, again, with quality of life, what matters to patients at the end of life? Do they want their physicians? What do they want them to be like? Do they want them to order them to offer a lot of choices and the client makes the decision? Do they want ultimate transparency? It used to be, you know, when my mother was dying, it was that you had the big C. That's not transparency. Do they want control of their care, not the doctor, which means they want choices from the doctor. They want a personal relationship with the doctor. Lots of us wish we'd had that. Communication, they want, you know, to be able to talk to the doctor when they need to, and empathy, an empathetic doctor. And there's lots of doctors here. I've worked with people where there's 5 doctors. You know, how does the client get, you know, what they want with 5 people going in a different direction? What patients want from their families. Do they want choice, or do they want the family to come in and, you know, help them make what they need to make? Do they want transparency? Do they want everybody in the family to know they're dying? In some cultures they don't. In some families they don't, you know, especially if there's cutoff. Do they need forgiveness, or do they need to forgive someone? This is very important. This happens in death. Do they want a family member to develop empathy? In other words, a son that was never really empathetic and they just want a hug from him, or a mother who never expressed that love and she now needs to just hold her son. Do they want no interference in decisions? All of this. Do they want spiritual needs? Do they have spiritual needs now? You know, they want them. Do they want music? What is their joy in life? Because enjoyment, really, when you think of it, is joy. So how can you bring that to this person? And then you need to advocate across the barriers to what they want to get that patient-centered care, which would be family meetings and meetings with physicians and a lot of other things you could do. Family-centered care. You navigate through the reactions of the family to terminal illness. And we all, I think, know about the stages. And so it's educating the family in all of these stages that they can go through down to acceptance and helping them get there. Helping them get there comfortably. And so what you have to have, as I said, a whole family approach. Nothing in aging is about an older client, it's about the whole family. So how can you be focused on the parent and the family? And that's your job, to work with the family and the patient to choose the right stages at the right time. We're back to Goldilocks, and then make those choices. I mean, you know how to do it. You have to ask their permission. And help with something called enhancing self-efficacy, which means that you've got to give this family the ability to care for that family member at home. Most people are really intimidated, but they can do it. And, you know, just think of birth. When I had my first baby, my husband couldn't even come in. And, you know, I had a baby at home at the end, and there was a cast of thousands. Not really. But, you know, we did it at home. I'm not, you know, advocating for that, but you can die at home. And the family can have the confidence to do that. Help navigating through all these confusing roles, because don't you think of it, there's a hospice social worker, there's a geriatric care management social worker, a hospital social worker. There are too many of us social workers. Help them to understand the roles what social worker does what, and then help the family to involve palliative care and hospice care at the right stage, and help in advocating for the family in the healthcare system that really needs to change, and that's what Gawande's book is about. And then with caregivers, you want to reduce the caregiver burden, which are, as you well know, I think, out there, depression, anger, anger, depression, stress, anxiety. You want to reduce, and then you want to add, you want to bring this at the right stage of death, and you want to bring in the right caregiver level of need, which means you need to do a caregiver assessment. You take the case, and I've built that in. You want to introduce hospice and palliative care, and hospice focuses on relieving symptoms, pain, and discomfort, and supporting patients. And palliative care is really comfort care. So you want to introduce those, explain them in much more detail. And again, palliative care is comfort care, can be used at any point. And then hospice is a team-oriented approach, a wonderful team of, spiritual physician, social worker again, and explain hospice and bring them in. And certainly bring them in earlier than the last month. And your role is to introduce palliative care and hospice, work with a hospice team. They like that as a liaison to the family. Communicate with the medical staff and the families, teach people to, again, assert themselves and make sure, all the other things that hospice doesn't do. Get durable power of attorney. They will order it, but did it come? And then arrange transportation, hire the care providers. The care providers, hospice doesn't do that, so you're going to have to hire either, private caregivers and good ones, or an agency that does that, or your own agency, or other kinds of service providers like a masseuse. This is a stressful moment. And explain the procedures to family, collaborate with everyone, and know when they're home and dying, when to call hospice and when not. And you're going to train your care providers to do that. So now what I'm going to do is make some special offers, which I do at the end of every webinar. And the first one is an hour consultation with me. And you can do it for anything. You can consult me about your GCM business problems, startup steps because you'd like to start one of these businesses up, startup problems, any kind of business problem, and how to add death and dying. And normally I do this for $150 an hour, and I will do it for $75, and it has to be set up on Calendly, which is this cool little thing you should learn about. That's the link, and the appointments are already there when I'm available, and you just check yourself in. And then the other offer is my Geriatric Care Management Operations Manual with Death and Dying added, and it's 2 manuals. You'll get a second one with 57 integrated forms into each service. This is without training. This is if you feel like you can do all this yourself, and that's fine. It's only $800 as opposed to normally on the website it's $1,100, and that's the hidden website below that. Michelle will give that to you. The next offer is for the Care Management Manual with all the parts that I just explained, plus 18 hours of training from me, one-to-one. On how to do the how to implement this the care management manual, plus 10 modules on how to start a geriatric care management business, from a business plan, sales, technology, marketing, financial projections, and all of that. Normally it was $2,200, and that would be available for $1,800, and the website's down there. And then finally, if you're startup struggle, so you can have all of that for $300 a month on a payment plan, and you'll get both manuals. You will get the training, and I will do that through a webinar training that I'm going to start with very small webinar groups, no more than 5. I've taught online at the University of Florida, and it does work, but I had 50 there. I'm keeping it to 5. And that will be every week, and you learn a lot more from your peers sometimes than you'd learn from me. And you'll have access in this and the last one to a closed Facebook group that a lot of people on this webinar are already in, people I'm working with. And, you know, it's just sharing information among yourselves and me sharing information with everybody. It's an interactive site. So now we're going to go into questions and answers, and Michelle is going to handle that.
All right, then. All right, well, so now, Cathy, I was wondering, would you like to introduce your 2 special guests that you have available?
I would love to.
Yeah.
I would love to. Gwen Harris was originally a student of mine in the Geriatric Care Management at San Francisco State. She started in the very beginning to just have a geriatric care management, a death and dying practice, and she has been with hospice already, and works now in an agency where she does care management with death and dying clients. And she's a care manager that does this, so she's just perfect, and also wrote that chapter in that book. I try to involve my students at every stage. And Anya Ishmaeli is been with hospice for 10 years, and she is a music therapist that designs music therapy in hospice, which is quality of life, and hospice is all about quality of life and of care. And so both of them probably know a lot more than I do. So any of us can answer questions.
All right, great. So,
hello.
Oh, yeah, there. Is that Gwen?
It's Gwen. Yes. Hi. Welcome, everyone.
How you doing? And then we've got Anya. Make sure we can hear Anya.
Hi.
Okay.
I'm here. Can you hear me?
Yes. Yes. So, Cathy, you presented a lot of really great information, and I'm sure that there are some questions. We have quite a lot of people on the line, and we have, about another 15 or 20 minutes open for any questions that people might have about any of the stuff that you presented, but also about any of the offers that you have as well, and how those might work out. So while we're waiting for some people to type in their questions, just wanted to see if Anya or Gwen had anything they might want to add or express about any of the stuff that Cathy shared from their perspective.
Hi, this is Gwen. I just wanted to reiterate what Cathy was saying so well, that, really the goal of this whole process is to alleviate pain and suffering, and in mostly, in patient-centered care, but also the family members that are, struggling. And I also really wanted to say that, the cultural issues really become tantamount to a lot of the things that are happening, individual families, the end stages of life bring up a lot of issues for people. The ending, it's definitely a big transition for most. So, being really aware of the family and the patient is, again, the goal of what's important to them, and how can I help them move through the pain and suffering as the geriatric care manager. What can I do to, help with the education, really help them move through the system? It's the most important thing, I think. The service that we provide to people is such a gift. So thank you.
Come on, people! I know a lot of people out there, and I'm sure they do have questions. And just remember, there is wrong question, and there's no, questions only really teach you, a new step. So if you're afraid to ask a question, please. But I think I know a lot of you. You're not afraid to ask questions, so fire in.
This is Anya. I just wanted to add add something in about just, so I work day in and day out with, with a hospice team and with patients and families, and I'm just imagining a geriatric care manager in the picture, which is which could be a really lovely and wonderful thing, I think, for hospice social workers and just for hospice in general, because hospice takes care of a lot of pieces, but it's always great, I think, to have somebody or something else in there to making sure all those pieces are actually, like, in hospice, hospice orders durable medical equipment, they order, medications, there's often, a hospice aide, like a personal care, but often the hospice can't necessarily provide enough personal care for that patient, and there are other hired caregivers in there, and it is a huge organizational feat. And so to have somebody else in there to be organizing that, and also explaining again and again the different roles that everybody has, because there are so many people in and out, it can just get so confusing for somebody who's ill and stressed, and so.
Well, yeah, that.
And this is, I'm sorry.
No, go ahead. Please go ahead.
This is Gwen. Cathy really, she made the example that it's very similar to birth, and and the same with death. I mean, we can create the best plans, and decide, like a family may want to, pass away at home, but life, there's a lot of changes, and that's why I think the geriatric care manager role is so important, because we really do need to be fluid. We need to be able to, amidst all these changes that can happen at the end of life and all of the different scenarios that can happen, we need to be focused on the patient, and to be able to make, even if there are different obstacles and struggles to the care plan, we need to make the best choices and help the family and the patient to make the best choices. And that's why I think the geriatric care manager role is so crucial during this period of time.
Thank you. And in the meantime, six good questions have come in. So I'm going to start in order. And we have a question first from Dee. Dee asks, she says, I'm still not clear about the opportunities to added to services when hospice is involved. It seems that they do so much.
Well, this is Gwen. We work as a geriatric care manager. I work on, so it's the continuing of care. As a geriatric care manager, you're working with them during, the phase of their illness, where, you're connecting them with doctors and support groups and doing all of that. And then we help them to recognize when hospice is needed, as Cathy said, hopefully sooner rather than later. And I think that we are like the bridge that helps them successfully navigate through hospice. Hospice does amazing work, and they're really wonderful, but there's a lot of care that goes on in the home or in the facility or wherever the patient is that, hospice, like the caregivers, like bringing in, different services that the care manager can help navigate. So we're an added. We bring hospice in, but we work together with them to make sure that all of the services are, and all of the care, including the family members, are included in everything.
Anyone else?
And I will say also, having worked for, can you hear me?
Yes.
This is Anya. Okay. Having worked for a few different hospices, yes, hospice does so much. I'm a total hospice advocate, obviously. But every hospice is very different in terms of staffing and what they can provide. The hospice that I work for now is the social workers are incredibly involved in organization, organizing both the hospice team and other people that may be involved in the care. But the hospice where I came from, the social workers did not have time to do that, and they really needed help, and it could have been, it could have been better. Same with the aides. Sometimes in the hospice that I worked for previously, the family maybe requested an aide 5 days a week or even 7 days a week, but often the hospice was not staffed to provide that. And or sometimes, you know, I mean, you just never know what a company is going through in terms of their staffing too. I mean, just to be frank, so maybe you know, this particular hospice aide, the family really wants Mary, but Mary can only come on Tuesdays and Thursdays, but the family wants Wednesdays and Fridays. And so if there were a geriatric care manager in there, maybe they could, you know, be helping with finding another caregiving agency, or just helping even helping the hospice team sort of, and be communicating to the hospice team what the family wants as well.
And don't forget, you know, in the 5 stages of death that we talked about, you know, there's a lot, you know, in the very beginning, hospice is not going to be there. And you are there through the entire navigating process. So you're not only bringing hospice in, but you're dealing with palliative care that can come in early, and you're bringing them in, and you're dealing with all the things that are happening that I described, you know, the needs of the family and the needs of the client, especially to advocate for themselves, you know, all along the way, and then being a part of the hospice team. And lots of times I have been involved where, you know, 24-hour care. Well, hospice does not have 24-hour care. So you know, you're going to manage, you're going to bring the care providers, but then manage those care providers, that those care providers are following hospice's, you know, rules. So you're a perfect complement, but hospice is not there in the beginning.
Okay, thank you. We have another question from Teresa, which is probably on a lot of people's minds. How do you approach the charges in the situation being such an emotional time?
Well, you know, I think anytime that you do geriatric care management, approaching charges is hard. And there, you know, it's really important to understand your own wealth. I mean, your own wealth of knowledge and your own value. And you know, you don't undermine the service that you're going to render. And families do really need this. And so it's just like coming into a client that has Alzheimer's. The family's bereft of their senses. And so it's the same thing. I mean, it's basically really valuing what you do, and that it is worth, you know, in the Midwest maybe $85, in New York $150 to $200. But again, when I talked about the house, what's the plumber worth? I always say that to my students. You know, I mean, you do an excellent, wonderful job, and so you approach it by really believing that in yourself and knowing that they really need help. And this is, death and dying is a long process sometimes. And so you are a navigator for them through it. And I would approach it just like I would, you know, any client. They come to you and they're, you know, my mother ran away, she has early Alzheimer's, and, you know, what do I do now? Where's a hospital near me that deals with that? I mean, you know, the emotion is there in almost every service you work with.
Okay.
You know, what I do,
sorry, go ahead. That's Gwen, right?
No. I was just going to say, you know, we train volunteers to be at the bedside of people that are dying, and I think one of the greatest tools that we can do as geriatric care managers, first of all, is to really have great self-care, to take really good care of ourselves, but also to be a vessel to really listen and hear what the struggle is, and to really support them. But mostly it's listening and then interpreting ways that we can help relieve the pain and suffering.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Thank you.
I'll move on to the next question. How receptive, this is from D. How receptive have hospice companies been to have a care manager come on board at this stage, at this point? I feel comfortable staying involved when the client has been on service with me prior to hospice.
Gwen, do you want to answer that?
Yeah, my experience has been hospice loves us because, you know, we are really the wealth of information about the family, about the patient. You know, we know them really well, and we really can help hospice to navigate, the services, just get to know the client or the patient really quickly and the family. So, we're the liaison. I think that they love us being around. That's been my experience.
And she's a geriatric care manager.
This is Anya again. I would say that, I think I would think of the geriatric care manager as the medical record in the hospital. You know, the one place you go to that has all the information, which would be amazing, because when you do start hospice, sometimes families are really hard to get a hold of, or maybe sometimes the family's not geographically present, so you have to just go a lot of different places and routes to find information if the patient is unable to answer it. So that would be wonderful to have a person actually there that just knows everything. It can make the hospice transition smoother and really have a better continuum of continuation of care moving into the hospice care.
Okay, thank you. This next question comes from Jennifer. When adding this component to your practice, how do you charge? Do you charge an hourly rate, or is it better to set a package price for this type of service?
Well, anybody that's ever worked with me, and there's a lot of people out there that have, know that I advocate for hourly, always, because, this is a business beyond, we're all, I'm a social worker. We're all social workers and nurses, and we're women, and charging is really hard. However, to make this a business that is profitable, so you yourself can get respite and buy braces for your kids, you have to charge at least 85% of your time to make it, and that's a hard fact. And so you need to charge hourly. If you charge a package price, you're going to lose money. And you need to also respect yourself again. Gwen alluded to this, and, you deliver a wonderful, wonderful product. You are, if you think in the plumber, all the systems work in your house. It's a great plumber. You know when to call a great plumber. Well, you are a great professional. And just like Anya said, most of these long-distance care providers, everybody in the system, especially hospice and palliative care, they're going, oh my God, where are all the medical records? What's the history? You have it. You are trained to get it, because you work with long-distance care providers. And so, you are worth $85 an hour, and if you want to run a business, this is what you have to charge. So I'd say hourly.
And let's not forget, this is Gwen, I do charge hourly, but hospice is covered by Medicare. So, the social workers or the people that come out, the medical system that comes from hospice is covered by Medicare. So, your service is well worth the amount of money that they're paying for the care that they receive.
And you're not duplicating hospice care. You're working as a team member, so you're doing, all the things that I noted that, that hospice doesn't do.
Okay, we have another question from Lisa. How much time do you carve out in your day for an average routine client?
That depends upon the type of client, and I divide clients into heavy, medium, and light care. And so a client who needs 12 hours of care or more, up to 24, they are taking more meds, have more families fighting, have more diagnoses, and more of everything. And so they need more attention. That client needs a lot of care, and when I talk about caseload, you've got to mix the caseload with clients, not 10 clients with heavy care, but maybe 5 clients with heavy care, and then some clients with light care, and light care would be non-medical. you know, somebody that can live at home and just needs that kind of care, and then medium care. And I always measure things in hours of care, even though you as a care manager are not delivering, you know, the hourly care home care does. But you know, that's an easier way than ADLs. So I would say, you know, a heavy care client, it takes a lot of hours, a lot of phone calls, a lot of family meetings, a lot of keeping track, and a lot of seeing the client. So there's not one order, there's no one answer. It's, you know, how you mix this caseload, and if you carefully divide it into levels of care, levels of client that have levels of care.
Okay, we have another question from Valerie. How would a GCM be able to overcome the hospice MSW, believing he or she is all that is needed, and reflecting that onto the patient/client and family?
I'm deferring to Gwen and Anya.
You know, I have to say, you know, the culture of care has, you know, in the medical system, all systems have really changed over the last few years. And, you know, not to, you know, the hospice workers, social worker, you know, they're working really hard, and you have to keep track of all of their hours, and you know, a lot of times they're very overwhelmed, and I think they really welcome our help. I can't, you know, stress this enough. You know, they are, because they're paid by Medicare, they're under a lot of stress to do things very quickly, and on a practical level, they just need extra help. And so I think you'll be surprised how welcome you are as part of a liaison on the team, and how much, you know, they rely on us to do the things that they're not able to do. So really, it's a wonderful relationship you can build with the hospice social worker. We work together as a team.
And this is Anya again. It sounds like the question might come from experience. I'm not sure. But, you know, and I do think sometimes hospice workers, I've certainly come across hospice workers who, you know, are any healthcare worker really, right? We're like, we want to save the world. And so, and you're flying around with a cape on. And so if you run across a social worker like that, then, you know, maybe just like, if there seems like a, I don't know, maybe wants to hold on to what they're, you know, what they're controlling within patient care, I don't know, just make them go out for coffee, make them go out for a cup of tea, because they probably definitely never take breaks like that, and make them, you know, be their social worker. Let them take off their cape and step out of that role for a while, because they probably need it.
Okay. Great. At this point, I don't see any other questions in the question panel, Cathy.
Okay. Well, thank you so much for caring enough about your profession and learning to attend this. And I so appreciate not only you being there, but your questions and your passion in, you know, learning about something that a lot of people have questions about. Should I even do this? But I hope you've learned that it is a great marriage for everybody, especially the client and the family. And thank you so much. And, you know, I will see you hopefully at my next webinar.
All right, thank you to our guests. Take care.
Yeah, and thank you so much to Anya and Gwen. Gwen, you know, just, oh my God, you know, one of the students that I'm so proud of, but I'm proud of so many of them, and there are many out there, and that she has helped me many, many times, especially in writing that chapter. And thank you for Anya, who is right there. She's in the field right now as Gwen. And thank you for helping me, and especially Michelle, who makes it all happen.
Aw, Shaw. All right, you take care, Cathy.
Okay. Thank you all. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye.